In the quaint town of Riverton, nestled among the rolling hills of Kentucky, life was serene and predictable. Everyone knew each other, and the local St. Mary's Church, situated at the heart of the town, was more than just a place of worship. It was the community's lifeblood. Here, the townsfolk gathered to find comfort, celebrate joys, and listen to the wise words of Father Thomas O'Connor, a priest who had served the town for over a decade. Father Thomas was a trusted advisor, and his counsel was often sought in both spiritual and worldly matters. However, his unwavering confidence and belief in his own righteousness would soon become the center of a scandal that would shake Riverton to its core. Anna Mitchell, a 30-year-old woman with a heart of gold, was one of the church's most dedicated members. Everyone knew her, from the children she taught in Sunday school to the elderly she assisted with daily chores. Anna was a rare gem who always put others before herself. Her radiant smile and kind eyes symbolized the goodness in this small town. But no one could have foreseen that within the sacred walls of the church, an event would unfold that would make everyone question their understanding of life, death, good, and evil. One chilly October day, Anna vanished without a trace. She was absent from Sunday services in the city park where she usually strolled with the neighborhood children. Calls to her phone went unanswered, and her home appeared to have been abandoned in haste. This alarmed the townspeople, and within days, a search was underway. No one expected that Anna would be found dead, let alone in the most revered place in the town. But this was just the beginning. A prelude to a long and painful story that would expose the darkest corners of the human soul and force Riverton to confront an inescapable truth, even within the church's walls. It all began with the discovery of Anna Mitchell's body in a quiet, dimly lit parish room. Her death was not just a tragedy. It was a heinous murder carried out with such cold precision that no one could believe the man they trusted with their deepest secrets was responsible. The investigation into this crime would shatter trust and ruin lives. But until the full truth emerged, the residents of Riverton clung to the belief that evil could not infiltrate their peaceful haven. However, with each passing hour and every new revelation by the detectives, it became evident that true evil could lurk even in the most righteous hearts. Thus began a story that would shake the town to its foundation, making every resident realize that no one is immune to the darkness hidden behind a facade of holiness. A cold autumn wind swept through the streets of Riverton, stripping the last leaves from the trees. It seemed like any other day. A bustling market, children playing in the schoolyard, and the sound of bells echoing through the empty alleys. But something was amiss. There was a subtle yet persistent tension in the air, as if nature itself was warning of impending doom. Early in the morning, as the town was just waking up, Lisa Carter timidly knocked on the door of St. Mary's Church. She came, as she did every Sunday, to help Father Thomas prepare the church for the service. Usually, Anna would already be there, tending to the flowers or arranging candles. But today, the church greeted Lisa with an eerie silence. A strange, oppressive silence that filled the empty pews and dimmed the light filtering through the stained glass windows. Lisa called out for Anna. Her voice echoed through the empty hall, but there was no response. At first, she thought her friend was simply running late, but a growing sense of unease began to take hold. Her intuition told her something was wrong. This feeling stayed with her as she walked through the dark corridors of the church, heading toward the rooms where the priest and parishioners usually held their conversations. It was there, in a small room closed to parishioners, that Lisa made a discovery that would change her life forever. The dim light from a lamp, barely penetrating the half-open door, revealed a horrifying sight. On the floor, amidst scattered books and papers, lay the body of Anna Mitchell. Lisa did not immediately comprehend what she was seeing. It was too sudden, too unimaginable. Anna's body was mutilated beyond recognition, and the first emotion Lisa felt was not fear, but an inexplicable emptiness, as if reality had suddenly lost all meaning. She screamed, but her scream was swallowed by the church walls. Time seemed to stand still. The realization that her friend was dead did not immediately sink in. At that moment, Lisa could not fathom how or who could commit such an atrocity. Anna's body was covered in bloody marks, and her face was so disfigured that she could only be identified by her clothes and jewelry. But this horror was not the only thing that shocked Lisa. Behind Anna's body, slightly to the side, lay a bloody cross on the floor. A symbol that the church, once considered a sanctuary, had now become a place of murder. This was not just an act of violence. It was a message, dark and merciless, thrown into the very heart of faith and trust. Soon, the police arrived at the scene. Their heavy footsteps echoed through the hallways as they examined the body and the crime scene. There were more questions than answers. Who could commit such a brutal crime in a place that was supposed to be holy, and why? Anna's body lay in a pool of blood, and everything about the crime scene felt wrong. Detective Alison Harper, known for her sharp intellect and professionalism, took on the case, sensing that it would be one of the most challenging of her career. Alison immediately noticed some peculiarities. Firstly, the crime scene seemed too clean. Despite the brutality, there were no signs of a struggle, which was odd given the state of Anna's body. Additionally, her personal belongings were untouched, ruling out robbery. Everything indicated that the killer knew Anna and acted with cold-blooded confidence. As the forensics team collected evidence, Alison began to analyze possible motives. This murder did not appear to be random. On the contrary, it seemed meticulously planned and symbolic, as if the killer wanted to send a specific message. But what exactly was the message? The town was in shock over the brutal murder. Residents could not believe that something so horrific could happen in their peaceful community, where people always left their doors unlocked and greeted each other with smiles. The church, which had always been a symbol of light and hope, was now shrouded in fear and suspicion. Alison understood that a long and arduous path to the truth lay ahead. This murder was just the beginning, the catalyst that would bring to light the dark secrets hidden behind the facade of decency and faith. And she was ready to delve into this darkness to find answers to the questions that now haunted all of Riverton. With the first rays of the sun breaking through the thick clouds, Riverton awoke to a new reality. The murder of Anna Mitchell sent shockwaves through every home and family in the town. Rumors spread like wildfire. Each resident seemed to know more than their neighbor and added their own version of events. However, at the center of all the talk and speculation was one question: who could commit such a heinous crime? Meanwhile, for detectives Alison Harper and Mark Ridgway, this morning was no different from any other, except for the horrific events that had unfolded the day before. Alison, barely having slept, was already in the office, poring over forensic reports and searching for any detail that could shed light on the case. Mark, though outwardly calm, felt a deep internal tension. In a town where they had both spent many years, murder was so rare that each case became significant. But this one was extraordinary. The first thing that struck Alison when examining the reports was the absence of signs of a struggle. This meant that Anna either trusted her killer or was caught off guard. However, she was even more surprised by the condition of the body. The injuries indicated that the crime had been committed with particular cruelty. Forensic investigators discovered that the murder weapon, a knife, had been left at the crime scene. This was unusual since most killers try to dispose of the weapon to complicate the investigation. But this criminal seemed to want to leave a message, and that was what bothered Alison the most. Mark, meanwhile, was gathering information about Anna. Her life seemed, at first glance, perfect. A loving family, active participation in the community, and devotion to the church. But Mark knew that behind the facade of perfection, there were often hidden secrets that could shed light on true motives. He began by interviewing her relatives, friends, and acquaintances, trying to build a complete picture of her life and her last days. Many described Anna as kind and compassionate, but some hinted at her recent withdrawal and anxiety, which she seemed to hide from everyone. Mark's first interview led him to Lisa Carter, Anna's friend who had discovered her body. Lisa was still in shock and couldn't believe what she had seen. She described Anna as a devoted friend and a pillar of the community. But she also mentioned that Anna had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. Lisa recalled a conversation where Anna seemed particularly distressed about something but refused to elaborate. As the investigation progressed, Alison and Mark began to notice inconsistencies in the testimonies of the townspeople. Some residents claimed to have seen Anna and Father Thomas together the evening before her death, while others insisted that the priest had already left the church when Anna arrived. Alison understood that people could make mistakes, but the number of inconsistencies was alarming. Mark decided to revisit the beginning of the investigation and review the evidence collected at the crime scene. He noticed some details that had previously been overlooked. In particular, he was intrigued by the fingerprints found on the knife and cross used in the murder. Initially, it was assumed that all the prints belonged to Anna and Father Thomas, but upon re-examination, it was discovered that there were traces of another person. These prints did not match any of the known suspects, suggesting that there might have been someone else at the crime scene. This discovery cast doubt on the theory that the priest acted alone and raised questions about a possible accomplice, or even another perpetrator. Alison, meanwhile, decided to recheck the priest's alibi. She approached parishioners who claimed to have seen him on the day of the murder. Under questioning, one of the witnesses, an elderly man named Henry Wallace, finally admitted that he was not actually sure whether he had seen the priest that evening or not. His initial statement turned out to be the result of pressure from other parishioners who did not want to believe in the possible guilt of Father Thomas. This confession further weakened the priest's position. However, the situation became more complicated when Mark found a previously unknown diary belonging to Anna. This diary was hidden in a secret compartment under her bed, and its contents were shocking. In it, Anna described her experiences and fears related to Father Thomas. She wrote that he often approached her with proposals that seemed strange and even threatening. In one of her last entries, she mentioned that she was planning to tell someone about these proposals, but did not specify what exactly was discussed. Alison and Mark began to realize that Anna might have had a secret that she was keeping, which could be the reason for her death. But the diary also mentioned a third person who, according to Anna, knew about her plans and tried to stop her. This further complicated the situation, as it became unclear who exactly Anna trusted and who could be her ally or enemy. Meanwhile, the detective's attention was drawn to the church's financial records, which showed that large sums of money had been flowing through the church's accounts in recent months, the origin of which was unclear. The money was transferred to the priest's personal account, but its further use was not documented. This discovery forced detectives to consider possible motives related not only to personal relationships, but also to financial interests. Alison also learned that Father Thomas had previously been involved in controversial real estate transactions involving land owned by the church. This might explain the source of the money, but it did not answer the question of how it related to Anna's murder. Each new piece of evidence only increased the number of questions. The case became more and more complicated, and Alison and Mark realized that they needed to find a connection between these disparate facts. They began to suspect that there was something much more behind all this than just personal motives or jealousy. Perhaps it was about a conspiracy in which several people were involved, each of whom had their own interest in the death of Anna. Meanwhile, anxiety began to grow in the city. People no longer knew who to trust. Every new discovery, every new suspicion added fuel to the fire. The community that was once close-knit and friendly began to fragment into groups, each with their own theories and suspicions. Alison and Mark knew that time was against them. They needed to find answers as quickly as possible before the situation got completely out of control. But the deeper they delved into the investigation, the clearer it became that this case was much more complex and dangerous than they could have imagined. As the investigation entered a critical phase, Alison Harper and Mark Ridgway began to realize that there were darker, deeper secrets behind Anna Mitchell's death than they could have imagined. The evidence they collected indicated that this crime was not just an act of violence, but the result of many ulterior motives and intrigues intertwined in the lives of several people who until that moment seemed infallible. The first key moment came when Alison came across an old folder of documents related to St. Mary's Church. Among the many papers that seemed insignificant at first glance, she found several letters dated more than 10 years ago, which were addressed to Father Thomas. These letters were written by a woman who mentioned her mistake and the unacceptable sin they had committed together. Alison realized that these letters could be related to an event that happened before Father Thomas moved to Riverton. Mark, who was conducting a parallel investigation, discovered another important piece of evidence, a birth record hidden in the hospital's archives, which confirmed that Thomas had a son born out of wedlock. This fact was carefully hidden, but as soon as it surfaced, it became clear that this secret could be a serious motive for the murder. Perhaps Anna found out about this, and this put her life in danger. Meanwhile, the church's financial reports continued to reveal new secrets. The money which was transferred to Thomas's personal accounts was used to finance the construction of a private home in another state. This house, as it turned out, belonged to the same woman who wrote letters to the priest. This discovery revealed that Thomas had been in contact with her over the years and may have been trying to hide his connection to his son. All this forced Alison and Mark to once again reconsider their initial assumptions. They now began to suspect that the murder might be part of a wider conspiracy. It is possible that not only Father Thomas, but also other people associated with the church had motives for eliminating Anna who could reveal these secrets. Alison decided to talk to Amelia Ross, the church secretary, again. She was one of the few who could know about the secrets hidden in the church archives. During the interrogation, Amelia admitted that she had long suspected Thomas had connections that he carefully concealed. However, she was afraid to talk about it since her own position depended on the priest, and she did not want to lose her job or respect in the community. Amelia also mentioned that in recent months, Anna had often asked questions about the church's finances and where the money was going. She seemed to know or suspect something, but did not share her thoughts. Amelia recalled how Anna came to her for the last time, a few days before her death, very worried, and said that she needed to discuss something with Father Thomas, but did not specify what. Another important detail was that Amelia noticed, on the day when Anna was killed, how an unfamiliar man was leaving the church. He was dressed in dark clothes and tried not to attract attention to himself. Amelia did not attach any importance to this at the time, but now this memory began to seem extremely important to her. Alison and Mark began to suspect that this man could be the third person Anna mentioned in her diary. They decided to check CCTV footage from the church area to try to identify him. On one of the cameras, they were able to capture the silhouette of a man entering the church on the evening of the murder. Although his face was hidden, they noticed that he acted extremely cautiously, as if he knew that he might be noticed. Alison and Mark began to suspect that this man could be a hitman or someone who was doing the bidding of Thomas. It is quite possible that the priest, afraid of revealing his secrets, decided to remove Anna from his path but did not want to do it with his own hands. This hypothesis explained many of the contradictions in the case, but so far, there was insufficient evidence. All this led to the detectives deciding to return to questioning Thomas. They knew he was hiding something important, but they couldn't yet figure out how to get him to talk. They planned to use conflicting evidence and newly discovered evidence to put him in a corner and force him to reveal the truth. Meanwhile, a new wave of rumors and speculation began in the city. The residents of Riverton began to realize that the murder of Anna Mitchell was just the tip of the iceberg, and that their quiet town held many more secrets than they could have ever imagined. People no longer felt safe, and mistrust grew every day. Alison and Mark knew they had to act quickly. They had a feeling that someone else might be in danger, and that the killer or his accomplice might strike again if they felt their secrets were about to be revealed. The investigation was nearing its climax, and they were willing to do anything to stop the killer and protect those who might still be in danger. The investigation had reached a boiling point. Alison Harper and Mark Ridgway knew they had to make one last push to tie all the threads together and finally find evidence that could lead to the arrest of the killer. The atmosphere in the city became increasingly tense. Rumors and fears penetrated every corner of Riverton. People were afraid to talk, but at the same time, everyone wanted to know what really happened on that fateful night. After long days and nights of evidence analysis and questioning, Alison and Mark returned to the key questions that still remained unanswered. What was Anna's true attitude towards Father Thomas? Who was the stranger seen outside the church on the night of the murder? And what exactly could Anna know that made her a target? Alison, following her intuition, decided to review the surveillance footage again. She managed to find footage that showed a mysterious stranger meeting with Father Thomas in the back of the church hours before Anna was killed. They talked about something for a long time, and although the recording was without sound, it was clear from their gestures that the conversation was tense. This moment was decisive for Alison and Mark. They now knew that the priest not only knew this man, but may have been complicit in his actions. Mark, meanwhile, worked on Thomas's financial statements and bank statements. His attention was drawn to a series of transactions involving large sums of money, which the priest transferred to an account registered in the name of a certain Stephen Fletcher. The name was not familiar to the detectives, but after some investigation, they learned that Fletcher was a private detective of dubious reputation who often. Alison realized that this Stephen Fletcher could be the same man who was in the church on the night of the murder. Everything pointed to the fact that Father Thomas hired him to get rid of Anna, who could reveal his secret affairs. Now the detectives had to find this Fletcher and get him to talk. They began checking the possible whereabouts of Fletcher, and soon their efforts were crowned with success. Fletcher was spotted at a small motel on the outskirts of a nearby town. Alison and Mark wasted no time in heading there. Their goal was not only to detain him, but also to force him to confess to his participation in the murder. When they arrived at the scene, Fletcher tried to escape but was unable to evade pursuit. He was caught, and under pressure from the evidence, he began to speak. Fletcher admitted that Father Thomas had indeed hired him to intimidate Anna into silence. However, things spiraled out of control when Anna, realizing her life was in danger, tried to escape, and Fletcher killed her in a panic. Fletcher also revealed that the priest was convinced that Anna had discovered his illegitimate child and illegal financial dealings, and that she was going to expose him. This could ruin his entire career and reputation, so he decided to take extreme measures. Alison and Mark knew they now had what they needed to arrest Father Thomas. They immediately returned to Riverton to fulfill their duty. The arrest took place quietly. The priest did not resist, but his face expressed something more than just fear. It was the realization that his carefully constructed world had collapsed. As news of his arrest spread throughout the city, Riverton was overcome with a sense of shock and disbelief. People who had believed in Father Thomas's holiness for so long now had to accept the bitter truth. Many could not believe that the person to whom they trusted their souls was capable of such an atrocity. There was one more important part left: the trial. Father Thomas's case was to be an event that would change the life of the city forever. Alison and Mark knew they had a lot of work ahead of them, but now they had a sense of closure. They had finally unraveled the complex web of lies and betrayal that led to the murder of Anna Mitchell. The trial of Father Thomas O'Connor was an event that split Riverton in two. Some residents could not believe his guilt until the very end, while others felt that justice had finally triumphed. But regardless of opinions, this process was an ordeal for everyone that changed the life of the town forever. The court hearings were tense. Prosecutors presented extensive evidence, including the testimony of Stephen Fletcher, who, despite his own involvement, became a key witness for the prosecution. He detailed Father Thomas's plans, explaining how he was hired to silence Anna and how things went horribly wrong. Evidence of financial fraud and the existence of an illegitimate child only strengthened the prosecution's case. Father Thomas, from the very beginning of the trial, maintained a grim silence. Only once, when his lawyer tried to portray him as a victim of circumstance, did he stand up and say that he was ready to accept his fate. This confession was brief and devoid of emotion, perhaps indicating that he knew his life was already ruined and further excuses would be futile. After long weeks of hearings, the jury reached its verdict. Father Thomas was found guilty of all charges. The sentence was severe: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. This verdict marked a significant moment in Riverton's history, shocking the entire community. Many residents, especially those who had believed in the priest's innocence, were devastated. But the truth proved stronger than their faith. Alison Harper and Mark Ridgway, who had worked tirelessly to solve this case, could finally breathe a sigh of relief. But along with the sense of accomplishment came the realization of how deeply this investigation had affected them personally. Alison, who had always prided herself on being objective and professional, realized that sometimes the truth can be overwhelming. Mark, for his part, was deeply moved by how easily people's trust and faith could be shattered. Life in Riverton changed after the trial. St. Mary's Church, once the heart of the town, now stood empty and neglected. Many parishioners stopped attending, and those who remained felt betrayed and disillusioned. The once close-knit community was divided between those who tried to forget what had happened and those who could not let go of the painful memories. For Alison and Mark, the case was a lesson they would never forget. They continued their work, but now approached each new case with even greater caution, knowing that behind every lie there could be much more hidden than it initially seemed. The story of Anna Mitchell, Father Thomas O'Connor, and the town of Riverton had come to an end, but its repercussions would be felt for a long time. The tragedy left a lasting impact, but it also imparted an important lesson: that evil can hide in the most unexpected places, and that the truth, no matter how painful, must always be uncovered and acknowledged.